Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health? Hi everyone, Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you today with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. I have with me today a very interesting guest, and she's had a really tremendous story to share. Her name is Regina Griego, and she is now a coach, author, and speaker, having retired from a distinguished career as an engineer. She was born and raised in New Mexico, and her Hispanic roots go back 400 years, and she also has Native American roots. Regina is married with 6 children in a blended family and has 7 grandchildren. She has mentored many people as a professor, senior engineer, and leadership coach. She is an activist for gun safety and juvenile justice. Regina is a Georgetown-trained coach and a fellow of INCOSE, the largest international systems engineering professional organization. She remains active in this organization, primarily mentoring and working with young people. She has a PhD, MS, and BS in electrical and computer engineering and an MS in computer science. Wow, that is some incredible degrees there and credentials. Welcome, Regina.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so happy to have you here today. You have really an incredible story of what's happened in your family and the ways in which you coped with that and have used some of the healing methods we've talked about on the show and some others that really have helped you get through some very traumatic and difficult experiences. So let's just start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and your story and how you came to write this book and be doing all this advocacy work that you're doing today.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I come from New Mexico, long roots here, and I grew up in a family of 4 children, and my brother, who is 16 months younger than me, and I were close for the most part, and we lost him in a very, very tragic way. His son, Ezekiel, had a mental break and shot and killed his father, his mother, and 3 of his siblings. Includes a 9-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 5-year-old. No, 2-year-old, sorry. And anyway, this was unexpected. This young man had no background of truancy or trouble with the police, addiction, nothing. He was, however, as we learned after everything, very isolated by his father. He was homeschooled, and they stopped teaching him at age, when he was a 3rd grader at age 8. And as a result of that, he also developed some mental health issues, and he was having hallucinations, both audio and visual. And so this led to this traumatic event where he basically had break, they call it, and I'll have to think of the word, but he basically was being guided by these video or audio hallucinations to kill his father and his family. But immediately after everything happened, obviously we dealt with a lot of what was the business of what happened, but I took guardianship of my nephew, Ezekiel, and at that time I also was aware of the fact that it was going to be a long journey because we had started talking with the lawyers who would defend him. And I chose to go to a place in Taos called Golden Willow. Golden Willow is a place for grief. It's a grief retreat house. And at Golden Willow, I specifically requested a therapist who was also an Apache shaman. And as part of my program, besides therapy, massage, meditation, yoga, and it was a 9-day event that I paid for, and I was in the retreat home by myself, and they would bring the services to me. But part of that was doing a drumming journey, which is a Native American tradition where you basically relax on the floor or a sofa, and he puts you in a meditative state with the drums. And in that meditative state, you vision and ask for your power animal. And that's where I met my power animal. And a power animal you can think of as the guardian angel of your soul. That's the easiest way I can explain it to people who are not part of the Native tradition. And anyway, these are the things that I did immediately after the event, because I knew that it was going to be a long journey. It was a very, very hard hit. It was very hard for the whole family to understand what was going on. We were all initially defending my nephew, and then bits of the family fell away from that. And I also did there's an organization called the Animas Valley Institute in Durango, Colorado, and they are a mix of Jungian technology or philosophy and also indigenous methodologies, and they use nature a lot for healing. So for a year, I entered the year-long program. I did 3 camping out where we were out in nature, 1 in Arizona and 2 in the Utah area, in the Canyonland area, and another one at a retreat house. So 4 times in that year, we met with the same group of people. They employ like the talking stick methodology. They encourage you to do, basically there's a whole format for which we sort of dialogue with nature. And the idea is that nature will reflect your soul and what you need to hear or address. And I had started with Animas Valley right after I lost my mom. And it was tremendously helpful. I mean, you do months of therapy in a matter of weeks, just because it's so concentrated and you're so much a part of this environment. It's almost like an immersion in the natural world, and you become a part of this group. And it's the talking stick methodology. You don't talk across each other, so it's not like talk therapy. It's basically you tell what's going on in yourself in terms of what you're experiencing in this environment. And there's usually some sort of guides. There are guides. In fact, my guide was also a trained therapist as well. And anyway, this is the way I went about healing. And this comes from years of experience with trying to use strictly conventional methodologies with drugs that always had side effects. And at one point they put me on lithium and I was just basically comatose. And in my younger days, and this was, when I was still having children. Now my kids are starting to turn 40 and stuff. But anyway, I also used poetry. I joined a writing group and poetry would just come to me. So I developed, and I have complete respect for antidepressants and that kind of stuff for people that, definitely need them. But for me, it wasn't the path during this time. And I knew it wasn't the path. I used a lot of these techniques that I've learned over the years as I interacted with my nephew, because I would see him initially, it was once a month. Then we got him moved to a adult treatment center where he was undergoing a lot of therapy, and just encouraging him in the area, in the, meditation and writing, that kind of stuff, to get him to also explore what was going on inside of him. Now, obviously, he had a psychotic break and he needed to be on antipsychotics, antidepressants. I remember the name of the what they diagnosed him was anti
Antisocial personality disorder?
no, schizoaffective
Schizoaffective.
schizoaffective
Yeah.
yeah disorder, trauma-based schizoaffective disorder with severe depression.
Yes.
Is what he was. And I learned later that his father was beating him, and a lot of his father was a pastor for the largest evangelical church, and using some of those kinds of beliefs in a way that were hurtful to the young man.
So he had his own trauma that he was dealing with, essentially.
Yeah. And my brother did too. And I knew that. That was why I wrote the book, is because the media did a very, very 2D, if you will, just a very flat notion of what happened. And they depicted my nephew terribly. And so the book kind of goes back to my brother's trauma, which was partly my trauma growing up, and then explores how that affected my nephew and all of the ways that led him to do what he did.
Can you tell us a little bit more, Regina? I mean, this is such an incredible story about how some of these more traditional healing methods, really rooted in, I'm sure, like thousands of years of practices, with Native cultures. Tell us more about how that helped you to heal your grief and your trauma. What was it that those methods allowed you to do that, let's say, the conventional Western sort of psychological or psychiatric approach really couldn't offer you?
Well, the first experience with the Golden Willow grief retreat, the drumming journey was just so powerful in that what first came to me was the animal, the raven, and that's why the raven is on my book. And he led me through my family's home, the ones that passed, and I was asking him, I need to honor them, because in New Mexico and lots of parts of the Southwest, and probably wherever Hispanics are, and there's a tradition called a descanso, which is you put a memorial to them. You'll see them all over the roads, the crosses and the flowers, or a bike with flowers or whatever. And it's to pin the spirit, the soul, to the ground, for the person to pass through whatever they're going to pass through next in the the sequence of being. And I had to do a descanso for my family, so I was asking him, this spirit animal, what should I do? And so for each of the family members, starting with the girls, because he took me up to the second floor, which is where the girls were killed, and then my sister-in-law and nephew. And in each case, I heard through this guide. Of course, this is you're in a meditative state, and this is what's going on in my vision. And I made a descanso, which was basically a circle with when I finally enacted it, because I went back later and did the descanso, I actually put lilies with a ojo de Dios, which is a little cross that you make with yarn. And then I did the guidance I got for the because I was actually interacting with the spirit and I saw little Angelina and JL. And anyway, I did a rose for the my sister-in-law, and a drumstick for my nephew. And then I wanted to go down to see my brother, and I saw, that's when Raven left me, and my Black Panther came, because I asked Raven, "Are you my power animal?" And he did this kind of thing, like saying no. And then the next thing I looked, and Panther was there, and I asked her the same question, and she kind of shook her head in the affirmative and turned around to have me follow her. And I followed her down to where my brother was, and the floor was dug up because of the blood and stuff. So I put a heart there, and Panther actually gave me her heart. Of course, when I did it in real life, I created my own heart. And what this did for me psychologically was, it gave me closure. It helped me say goodbye to their spirits. And in this vision that I had, this all came about. And then I later did it also with a curandera, which is a healer, a natural healer that we have in New Mexico. And so we went to the house and we did the sage, and I actually laid down these various descansos based on what I had done in this vision quest. So that was a very powerful one. In the Golden Willow as well, we did the sweats, which you can think of it as the Native Americans' version of church or going to a church service, although it's much more intense because it involves cleansing of the body. It involves lots of prayer, a certain amount of chanting, and basically you're in a cave of sorts. So the darkness invites whatever emotion and whatnot you have in you associated with your soul. And that was very, very powerful. Now, on the year long where I was in nature, there were two things that I talk about specifically. One was when I was feeling this aversion towards the cold, because I grew up very poor and our house was always cold, and I was in the back room where there was no heat. And when I had that aversion to the cold, one of the things I did was go out, dig a hole, put water in it, and based on a dream, because you do a lot of things with dreams. You do a lot of work on what dreams are coming to you and actually acting them out. And nature provides what you need in order to feel that reflection. And I've experienced that before, as I said in my, and then the second thing that I did was a whole experience with a vision fast. And what the vision fast does for you is it gives you that opportunity to be by yourself without the stories that people are telling you, that the news is telling you, because grief is a hard thing, because we get so many messages on how we should be feeling and how we need to be doing such and such. And just being alone on the top of this mesa where there's a mile down, and I was in a state of fasting for 4 days, and I had a ritual where I would do my grooming in the morning, the combing and whatnot, and then I would do a circle where I would do prayer to the 6 directions, the 4 directions, and then up, and then the earth. And then I would go out and I would basically walk in nature, and I had a little route, and I would employ things. So there was a grandfather tree with a big area in front of it, and I would do a method, like there's this method called the mandala, where you put 2 overlapping circles, and you go on one side and you express into nature, into the trees, one aspect of two polar opposites. In this case, I did sad and happy because obviously I was feeling a lot of deep sadness and wanted to be able to feel the balance between the sadness and the joy, because again, you get that message, you should be sad when, you should feel a certain way. And so I spoke all of the sadness I felt, and even acted it out on one side of the mandala. Then I went to the other side and worked as hard as I could to express joy and thankfulness for my children, my grandkids, thinking of my baby girls, that are new babies in the world and stuff like that. And then I go in the middle, and the practice is just to sit with both sides, and it just balances your soul, really. It makes you feel a sense of completeness and the necessary seasons of life, and how hard something like this could be, but at the same time, how much joy there is in the world. So it really just gives you perspective. And being out in this environment, and then there was this huge tree that I would go visit that was out toward the ledge, and it had been hit by lightning. And I called her Ecstasy. She was my ecstasy tree. She so wanted to be, reaching for the sun that she got burnt by the light, and nature just gives you these various, how would you say, analogies or ways of storing the experience that you're feeling to, and then just being alone on that ledge, I was happy. I was content. I had everything I needed, and realizing that, life can be simple. And even though and you get that sense that there is a continuation, so that my brothers and his family were out there somewhere, and I felt their spirits close to me. So that's a lot, and it's hard to totally describe. The first time I went to an ADI was after I realized I had been incested in my family, and it was after my mom's death, and the incest was still a part of what I was dealing with. And one of my circuit nature walks that I did, I came across a set of rocks that reminded me of the person that victimized me. And I just had this urge to just throw rocks at it. And I just started throwing rocks. And then I started just screaming at all the ways that, women are treated, and all the ways that, these kinds of things are unfair and unjust. So just acting that out and that anger out, it was such a release. I was a brand new person when I went home after this particular retreat.
Yeah, and thank you so much for sharing to such, great depth about these experiences, and I appreciate your courage and vulnerability in sharing about it. I mean, what really strikes me is the power of ritual, and
Right.
how much, our Western culture especially really has moved away from ritual, where in many other older cultures and traditional cultures, the rituals are still alive and well, and the rituals allow us to make transitions, to have closure, like you said, with one chapter of life, and to open up a different one. And I love that some of the rituals that you practiced are so what we would call holistic. It includes the body and getting physical. It includes the mind, the emotions, and the spirit, and how important it is to do the spiritual work to truly heal from trauma, especially.
Right. Exactly. And the sort of the culmination of all that was writing this book. For me, writing this book, the first reason I wanted to do it was to, as a descanso, to get it out of my system and onto the page so that I could pin it down. Because that notion of pinning down something, to actually doing, if you have a life journey, you could draw and you put little crosses at every place where you felt you lost a piece of yourself. And I've done that before.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you, ritualize and what would you call put closure to those pieces, because we all in our journey lose pieces of ourselves or get hurt in a very profound way. And so that's one of the reasons I wrote the book. The second one is obviously to correct the story, because I was so distraught over how horrible the story was covered. And then the last reason is to try to change things in the world. My entire career as an engineer, I did a lot of paper, a lot of writing around case studies. Case studies was my path, because when I would go to certain conferences, particularly with the IEEE, the international, the electrical engineering one, I would look at these papers and I'd say, yeah, how does that scale? And has anybody done that in real life? And so case studies were my way into, theory, if you will, or methodology. And so writing this book as a case study showed a lot of this, and that's why it's Sins of the System, is because shows a lot of the flaws in the system. Mm-hmm. And I tell the story very, very candidly, and then at the end, in chapter 40, I go through specific systems that failed along the way, and a lot of that sort of thinking is what got me into my advocacy work.
Yeah. And I think in this time, I think we're in a bit of a revolutionary time right now, where the pandemic, for example, really showed us where so many of our systems are broken and failing and need an overhaul, and just aren't working in the way they're certainly not working to serve everybody. So I'm curious as to what some of those broken systems you may have found in your experience and that you write about.
Right. Well, the first one was, the brain and what a child can endure before they need help. And so if a child is in an isolated situation, and they have a father who is very, very, he was very afraid of, is there any way that a child can reach out anonymously? And of course, here in New Mexico, our children's, youth, and family services is totally underserved. They don't have enough people. And so even though there had been calls on his home, they didn't come in and interview the children. My brother was successful in chasing them away anytime they had a complaint, like there was a complaint about his daughter's teeth at the church. And they had somebody call my brother, and he's very, very powerful human that basically told him it's none of your business, and she's okay, and this is just nothing. And so when those kinds of things happen, when a child is in any kind of situation, they have very little resources at their hands, especially when they're isolated the way they are. And then of course the school system here in New Mexico, and I know it's true in California because of the Turpin case, mm-hmm. Which I know you're probably familiar with, where many children from age 2 to 22 were being abused, and they were supposedly homeschooling them.
Right.
And that's what it is in New Mexico. All you have to do is say, I'm homeschooling my child, and there's no follow-up. They're not taking any kind of standardized tests. They're not being visited by the state. There's no paper, evidence of learning that they give. And my sister-in-law actually didn't graduate from high school, so they registered under my brother's name, who did graduate from high school. So that's a failure of the state, and that gives us kids that are potentially abused, and we have no idea how they are from an academic and perspective. And then the juvenile system was horrible. It was such a nightmare. Just the first place that he hit, the only counseling they had there and of course, this kid was, obviously psychologically impaired. They didn't, all their interest was to keep him quiet, keep him from hurting himself and hurting others. They were not interested in healing him in any way.
Right.
And then when I got him into the adolescent treatment center, which took a lot of basically petitioning to do that, then he got better care, and it was a much saner place, and they treated him like a person, And then from there, when they put him in the next place after he got, because initially he was only going to serve, he was going to get out at age 21, and then there was an appeal and more hearings, and then he eventually was sent to prison. But in that second place, or in that place that he was the next time, they were gunning for him from the beginning because of his crime, and there was a sentiment both by the staff and the clients there, that he was, basically a bad kid, partly because of the media, and so he got treated poorly in that particular facility. So there was a lot of things with the juvenile system, and that whole appeal process that happened was actually something that our governor at the time instigated, and we figured that out later because she had the cabinet secretary, one of her cabinet secretaries for the Children, Youth, and Family Services, attending all our meetings with Nehemiah, with Ezekiel. I use both names interchangeably because I use one name in the book. But so, and then she started bringing her lawyer to those meetings, and then we witnessed the lawyer consulting with the prosecution. So there was this sense that the state that we had to trust to heal this young man and keep this young man in their custody was also trying to prosecute him and send him away forever. And so they actually did that in many ways, and the story is in the book. And ultimately they won. They sent him to jail for life, and he was at that time only going to be able to get a shot at parole, just a chance at parole, when he was almost age 53. So this is a 15-year-old who had the brain, because they figured out through brain scans that he had a traumatic brain injury and was 2 years delayed in his brain development. So he had a brain of a 13-year-old. They're going to put him away and not even give him a shot until he's almost 53. Now, as part of my advocacy work, the New Mexico Coalition for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, just passed a bill, like the governor just signed a bill that now is going to allow people that have committed crimes as juveniles and are serving in adult prison sentence at 15 years. For most cases, 15 years, they will get a shot at parole. So this is tremendous for him because he might have a shot at life. And that, if you look at this child's story, he was incarcerated his whole life. He was incarcerated by his father because his father isolated him. He went to church and he went home, and then he attended family functions, but he didn't do anything normal kids do, like go off by himself to the park or anything like that. Nothing like that. And then he would basically not. And it's not good. Chances aren't good when they're that old that they'll go by the parole board right away, and so he might die in prison the other way. And he's not an unusual kid, and so that was the advocacy work we did, and so that was part of fixing the juvenile system. Now, the other big contributor and the other advocacy I do is on gun safety. My brother had 8 firearms, 15,000 rounds of ammunition, all available to his 4 children. Mm-hmm. And he had taught his eldest son, Ezekiel, how to use every one of these weapons, how to pull them apart, put them back together, what to use them for. My brother was in the 82nd Airborne, and then he was in the gangs for 10 years in LA. And so he knew a lot about this weaponry. And he bought all of these without background checks. He bought them, and they were not securely stored. And because of his religion, he didn't believe in psychology or psychotherapy. He believed that those things were cultish and against religion, and so he Nehemiah wouldn't even tell him that he was having these hallucinations, because he knew he would say that he was possessed by demons. Mm-hmm. So this kid was in a rough situation. So these guns, we just passed a law, that child access law. And this is one of the things I advocated for now. I advocated for a lot more of the weapons. California is in a much better state in that regard. But we passed a law for child access, to where a parent could be held for a misdemeanor if a weapon is brandished, like they got it from their house, and a kid brandishes a weapon. And if it's used in any kind of crime, like where there's somebody is shot, then the parent is a 4th degree felony. So, and it's more for encouragement, it's more for a deterrent effect than anything else. So those are the kinds of things I'm working for, because and I haven't started on the school stuff, but the gun stuff and the juvenile justice. And some of the things that I believe in terms of the juvenile justice is that, New Mexico has, even just the average child has, you're familiar with the ACEs, the adversary.
Adverse childhood experiences. Yeah, we've talked about it on the show before. It was a research study done here actually in Northern California at Kaiser Permanente, where they looked at 17,000 of their patients and their mental health and physical health issues, and looked to see if there was a correlation with how many and what kinds of adverse childhood experiences or traumas they had experienced. And you could get a score out of 10. There were up to 10 things that if you had experienced them, what they found is you were more likely to have issues later in life with your health, with your mental health, with addiction, suicidality, all kinds of different things. There's a major correlation. And they now understand that it changes how kids' brains function, having these repetitive, traumatic or extremely stressful experiences changes how their brains develop, and, just plants the seed for a whole bunch of problems later in life.
And a lot of children just out of the box in New Mexico have, on the order of 4 or so of these. And then, of course, all children that are incarcerated are like at the 8 to 10 level. And so what I think is that when a child is arrested, that there should be a social worker or somebody else, not just the police, because when they arrested Ezekiel, there were 2, and he's 100 pounds at this time, mind you, he's 100 pounds, and he's 5'6", I think. And there's 2 large adult males basically interrogating this kid, and he hasn't slept for 48 hours. When I went to visit him the first time, it was clearly psychotic to me. He was saying stuff that was pure nonsense. And, but they didn't bring anybody in that was not a police officer. And these police officers are not trauma trained, or they may get a little bit on mental health, but I don't think much. And so they need, when these children, anyone under 18 is arrested for whatever reason, even, they found him with drugs, chances are these children are high on the ACEs.
Yeah.
And chances are the family is in some state of trauma. And without being punitive, which is the hard thing that the state has, trying to figure out what kind of services, the social services that a family may need. You know, there's many women that are raising children by themselves.
Yep.
There's, you know, I'm convinced my brother was, you know, PTSD from his military service and his, you know, his growing up and everything. And so I believe from a juvenile perspective, we need to be, in order to save these children, the first time they're arrested, they need to be looked at. The family needs to be looked at in a careful way, rather than just a punitive method of sending him to prison. And then he's got a record, and then that just perpetuates itself, you know?
Well, I mean, and the original intention, even in prison settings, was rehabilitation. They were supposed to be, and in some prisons, I think there may still be programs and things, you know, and mental health services and ways to help people, you know, recover from whatever it was that caused them to commit crimes and like go back out and be a productive member of society. But I think we've really strayed from that. I don't think that that's really the intention with these institutions. I mean, what an incredible story, Regina. Wow. You know, for you to I think, you know, many people, if they had experienced the kind of trauma and intergenerational trauma, really, it goes further back, right, that you've experienced, would have collapsed under that, or would have, you know, maybe turned to like drugs or alcohol or addiction of some sort to cope with it. But not only did you take ownership of your own healing process and sought out the techniques and tools and methods that, you know, you knew to be healing for your body, mind, and soul, but also to be doing this incredible advocacy work and trying to take your family's experience and create some good from it is really incredible. I think this is a very moving story.
Thank you. And that is exactly what I wanted to do. That's sort of the promise we made when, you know, on the day, you know, at the services, the memorial services, and also at the first year anniversary of the death of the families, is we, you know, we want to make some good out of it, because it shouldn't be just just one of the other stories and another mass murder that goes down, you know.
Right. I don't know if you can hear, as sirens go by here in San Francisco as we speak. How is Ezekiel doing now?
Well, he's holding his own. It's rough because, you know, prison is extremely racial, and they sent him all the way to North Carolina, which into the, like, probably the worst prison they could have sent him to. And it's unclear why he did that. I think it was intentional myself, but there's, you know, a large Black population, and then half again as many white, and there's only on the order of 3 to 5 brown people, and he's 30% native blood, and then the rest Hispanic, and he's got very, very brown skin and very unique. And they said this all in the court, that he wasn't gonna, you know, and he got, initially when they moved him to North Carolina, he got stabbed 8 times and was in 2 very severe fights where he had to defend himself. And but since then, things have calmed down quite a bit. But for example, I mean, people don't know these kinds of things. You have to have a partner go with you to the shower for obvious reasons, you know, because you're vulnerable. And then, you know, the COs will make deals with some of the gangs in the prison. And, you know, because I used to ask him, what, don't you sleep at night? Because he's got his own cell and they lock it, supposedly. But they can make deals with the COs to unlock it in the middle of the night. And so it's a very stressful environment. You know, they say they sent him over there so he could be in general population and get some programming, but that hasn't been the case. So our goal is to get him into medium, and he's trying to behave, you know, be very, very low, you know, low profile, so that he can, you know, get moved into medium, and then from there get some amount of, you know, training, because he's got to get something on his record, so that when he does go up for parole, he might have a shot, you know.
Wow, really incredible. Thank you so much, Regina, for sharing yourself and your story and your experiences. If people want to find out more about the book or about you, where can they go?
My website is transcending-futures.com. Transcending-futures.com. And the book is featured in there, and along with my other things that I'm trying to provide as a service. And anyway, you can contact me through there.
Yeah. And any final thoughts for us on maybe like what you would like to see as the future of mental health, or some of these systems, these broken systems being changed? Like, do you have a vision of what you're trying to work toward and create in the world?
Well, I think my focus is around children, which means healthy parenting. And it doesn't matter what the parental structure is. So basically, healing the family and providing support for children, because this is a very complex world, and it's getting harder on parents to adequately provide. And so that's my ultimate goal, and also it's just to create more whole people that are having children.
Yeah. I share that with you. Thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yes. And thank you all who tuned in. If you found this podcast helpful, inspiring, please do share, like, comment, subscribe, all the things that will help us get this information out into the hands of more people. And we'll see you next time on Kaleidoscope of Possibilities. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.